Welcome back to the programme. The President of the European Commission's delivered his State of the Union address in Strasbourg. He started by thanking only 27 of the 28 members of the EU, despite the fact the UK will continue to be part of the bloc for another 1.5 years. And for Britain, instead of thanks, he had a warning.
On March the 29th, 2019, the United Kingdom will leave the EU. It will be a sad and tragic moment. We will always regret this, and you will regret it quite soon.
At the end of the address, everyone got up and applauded, except for a group of British MEPs, among them the hardcore Brexiteer Nigel Farage. But it wasn't just the UKIP members that gave Juncker a frosty welcome.
The European Union is not Europe, and Europe is not the European Union. Jean-Claude Juncker wants to force the European Union to become a single state, yet we know that the euro is not a success story. We have extraordinary levels of debt, unemployment and social instability.
The Commission chief apparently didn't take this verbal attack on his vision of Europe too well. As the Eurosceptic MEP harangued him, Jean-Claude Juncker got up from his seat and left the room. Now, with the German election now less than 2 weeks away, Western media have been busy trying to track down Russian hackers who, as they assume, should have already started meddling in the European powerhouse's vote. In a Washington Post article, one security expert is quoted as saying that it just doesn't feel right that Russians haven't struck yet. The report adds the reason may be that Germany's nailed the art of cybersecurity. Yet it also states that no evidence of any attempted meddling has actually been detected. RT's Jacqueline Vuga takes a closer look at the story.
If you haven't been in a coma for the past year, you've likely heard a thing or two about alleged Russian interference in America's recent presidential election.
The CIA has concluded Russian hackers intervened in the U.S. election with the purpose of helping Donald Trump win.
Hacking and leaking that the administration says the Russians carried out. Connect the dots. Russia did it.
And while those claims were never backed up by any solid evidence, just a lot of speculation and hearty assurances, that hasn't stopped the world from pointing the finger at Moscow and also predicting that the big bad Kremlin would do the same again in Europe.
The Russian hacker scene is huge. German security agencies and cyber experts are alarmed.
All evidence points to Russia. That's why we cannot rule out and why we're preparing for similar efforts to influence Germany's election.
Many warned that the upcoming German elections would be a prime target for those pesky Russian hackers. So security was bumped up and investigations were launched. But even a year-long search by German intelligence for potential Russian interference failed to uncover any evidence of Kremlin-backed meddling. Worry not, though, that hasn't stopped anyone from seeing Russia as democracy's enemy number one. A recent article by the Washington Post examines what sinister implications there could be behind the fact that we have yet to see Moscow's hand trying to steer Berlin's vote. It's just not an election anymore without Russian hackers, with one think tank director saying the silence worries him. Quote, "It doesn't feel right." The article alleges that the lack of evidence doesn't necessarily mean Moscow's innocent. Perhaps they just haven't been successful, or Moscow is simply biding its time. And it goes on to say that Russia's attack may only be seen after the election, speculating that Russian-linked networks may try to manipulate the vote count, so remain alert. The Washington Post even quotes a German security association that works closely with German intelligence agencies who came up empty when looking for sophisticated attacks coming from Russia.
We did not find any evidence that there are more sophisticated attacks coming from Russia in the pre-election period.
But that lack is credited to Germany's resilience in stringent new legislation against the spreading of fake news. Legislation that doesn't come into effect until October, but, you know, whatever. The article also concedes that perhaps Moscow decided to leave Berlin alone because they are close trade partners, something that Putin himself has said in the past.
We did not interfere in the US elections, so why would we create any problems here? We have good relations with Germany. It's our largest trade and economic partner in Europe.
But he is Russian after all. Statements really only become fact when Western powers make them. So the clear message for Russia is, you're damned if you do hack, and you're damned if you don't.
Meanwhile, according to a poll, 3 of the smaller parties vying for third place in the upcoming election have shot up in support over the last week. The Free Democratic Party now has a 9% share, while Die Linke, also known as the Left Party, has over 10%, with Alternative for Germany a fraction ahead. We spoke to an MP from Die Linke, Alexander Neu, for his thoughts on German foreign policy.
The tension with Russia began to escalate at the end of 2013, early 2014 with Maidan, the coup of February 2014. Then it was Crimea joining Russia. And at the same time, the war in Syria with the presence of both Western and Russian troops. Germany also has a military presence in Syria with recon aircraft, a tanker and a frigate. And that contradicts international law because the Syrian government didn't give permission. We are also present in Ukraine. The West is playing referee at the cost of the Ukrainian people, warning that Russia must be penalized. But the West, EU and NATO member states like Germany, the UK and the USA are deeply involved in this conflict, just as much as the warring factions. Since 2008, we've been seeing the end of the unipolar world order, where the West can enforce its own agenda. We're switching now to a multipolar world order, and it is difficult to accept to coordinate foreign and security policy with other powers like China, Russia, or the BRICS countries and respect their interests. In the last 25 years, we got used to doing what we want and not caring about international law. And now we are in the situation where this does not work anymore. It didn't work in Ukraine, Georgia in 2008. In Syria, the West did not succeed with violently changing Assad's regime. On the contrary, we are most likely the losers there. In 2016, a Washington University study revealed that most refugees coming to Europe originated from countries that were bombed. The second group is economic refugees. When the West destroys other economies which are not competitive, we then demand free trade and say we want to sell our goods there. And if the economy turns to ruins, we don't care about it. These are the states in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, and we shouldn't be surprised when people pack their bags and want to come to Germany, because they want a normal life. It's understandable.